Have you heard the news about the Switch 2 and the next big Pokémon game? It's not all sunshine and rare monster catches. In fact, a lot of gamers are seriously upset, and it all comes down to a tiny little cartridge and a big question about who really owns the games we buy. Let's break it down. When Nintendo pulled back the curtain on the Switch 2, they introduced something called game key cards. Imagine a regular game cartridge, but instead of holding the entire game, it only has a small piece of data on it. The rest of the game? You have to download it directly onto your console. Think of it like a physical key to unlock a digital game. Initially, everyone thought, okay, that's probably for third-party developers to save on cost. Surely Nintendo's own big titles will still come fully on the cart. Well, that assumption just got turned on its head. The source of all this drama is the newly announced Pokémon Pokopia. This game sounds pretty cool, mixing the classic monster catching we love with a social sim vibe, kind of like Animal Crossing. It's set to launch on the Switch 2 on March 5th, but here's the kicker. The official Nintendo Store page reveals that Pokémon Pokopia will use a game key card. To explain how it works, Nintendo dropped a short video, and let's just say the reception was frosty. The video racked up thousands of dislikes, and the gaming community has been buzzing with frustration ever since. So why are people so angry? It's about more than just an extra download. The core of the issue is ownership. When you buy a physical game, you expect the whole game to be right there on the cartridge or disc. You own it. You can lend it to a friend, sell it, or just put it on your shelf knowing it's yours forever. But with the game key card system, you don't really have the full game in your hands. You have a key that unlocks a digital file stored on your console, a file that's tied to Nintendo's online servers. This taps into a growing fear among gamers about the future of game preservation. What happens if Nintendo decides to shut down the Switch 2's online services years from now? Suddenly, that game you bought might become undownloadable and your physical key becomes a useless piece of plastic. This isn't just a hypothetical worry, we see it happening all the time. Publishers can delist games, removing them from digital storefronts forever. A great example is the 2019 game John Wick Hex. The John Wick film franchise exploded in popularity, which likely drove up the cost of the license. The publisher decided it wasn't worth it anymore, and poof, the game was removed from sale. It's not just older titles either. PUB for the PS4 and Xbox One was a huge hit, but in August, the publisher announced they were ending support for those versions, making them completely unplayable. The game you bought is now effectively gone. This problem has gotten so bad that a consumer movement called Stop Killing Games has emerged. Their goal is to challenge the legal right of companies to essentially destroy games that people have already paid for. They're making some headway in the UK and Europe, pushing for new consumer protection laws. The controversy around Pokémon Pokopia is pouring gasoline on this fire, showing that even the biggest names in gaming are heading down this path. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of how these game key cards actually work. You go to the store, you buy a physical box with a cartridge inside. You pop that card into your Switch 2. The console then recognizes the card and prompts you to download the rest of the game files from the internet. Once the download is complete, you can play the game as much as you want. The good news is, as long as that cartridge is in your console, you don't need an internet connection to play. It acts as the physical authentication key. Now for a question a lot of people are asking, can you still sell or lend these games? The answer is yes. The game key card itself can be treated like any other game cartridge. If you sell it or lend it to a friend, they just have to go through the same process. They'll pop the card into their Switch 2, download the game data to their own console, and then they can play. The card is the key, and whoever holds the key can unlock the game. But again, this relies on the game data still being available to download from Nintendo's servers. Pokémon Pokopia isn't the first game to use this system on the Switch 2, but it's by far the most high-profile. We've seen it with third-party titles like Street Fighter VI and Nobunaga's Ambition. Awakening. Even a beautiful remake like Bravely Default Flying Fairy HD Remaster is using a game key card. To keep things transparent, Nintendo is putting a little key icon on the cover of these games, which will tell you exactly how much data you'll need to download. So what's the point of all this? Why is Nintendo, a company famous for its physical media, pushing this hybrid model? Officially, Nintendo hasn't been super direct. In an investor call, President Shuntaro Furukawa vaguely mentioned it would help them get more active support from third-party developers. Reading between the lines, it all comes down to one thing: money. The Switch 2 is a more powerful console, capable of running games with high-end graphics. Those fancy graphics create huge game files. The current maximum size for a Switch 2 cartridge is 64 gigabytes. A game like the Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077, for instance, uses the entire 64 gigabytes cart. But some games are even bigger. The upcoming Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is expected to be a whopping 88 gigabytes. For a game that large, there's no cartridge big enough, so the game key card becomes the only option for a physical release. That explains it for massive games, but what about smaller ones? This is where it gets interesting. Remember Bravely Default Flying Fairy HD Remaster? That game is just over 9 gigabytes. It could easily fit on a standard cartridge with plenty of room to spare, yet it's also using a game key card. This suggests that Nintendo might be offering developers cheaper, lower capacity cartridges if they agree to use the game key system. The developer saves money on manufacturing, and Nintendo offloads the data storage and delivery costs to the consumer's internet connection and internal storage. This cost-saving theory seems even more likely when you look at Nintendo's own pricing. The upcoming Super Mario Kart World for the Switch 2 is reportedly the first Nintendo game to be priced at $80. The speculation is that this price hike is partly to cover the cost of putting the entire massive game onto a high-capacity physical cartridge. So developers and Nintendo seem to have a choice: use a more expensive cartridge and maybe charge more for the game, or use a cheaper game key card and make the player download most of it. For many gamers, this feels like a raw deal. They're being asked to pay full price for a product that isn't complete, a product that could disappear in the future. The physical box on the shelf no longer guarantees a playable game for decades to come. It just holds a temporary key to a digital file. This shift represents a fundamental change in our relationship with the games we love, moving away from true ownership and toward a licensed, service-based model even for physical releases. The backlash against Pokémon Pokopia isn't just about Pokémon. It's a stand against this industry-wide trend. Fans are using their voices and their wallets to send a message to Nintendo and other publishers: we want to own our games. We value preservation, and we don't want our collections to have an expiration date. It will be fascinating to see if this public pressure has any effect, or if the game key card is simply the new reality of gaming we'll all have to get used to. What do you think about this? Are you okay with the game key card system, or are you concerned about game ownership and preservation? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video and want to stay up to date on all things gaming, make sure to hit that subscribe button. See you in the next one.